All right, welcome back, everybody, for another deep dive. Today, um, we're tackling those robot lawn mowers.
Mm.
You know the ones I'm talking about, right? They seem to be popping up everywhere these days. So can a robot really give you a better lawn than you can get yourself?
Yeah.
That was what we're going to find out. We've got some pretty interesting research fresh from the journal Hort Technology.
Oh, yeah. Definitely sounds interesting.
The article is called Autonomous Compared with Conventional Mower Use on St. Augustine Grass Lawn Quality.
Okay.
And it's by Bori, Lindsay, and Unruh.
Interesting. So I think a lot of folks out there are really curious about these robot mowers, but maybe also a little bit skeptical. Are they just a gimmick, or can they actually produce a really nice lawn? And this research really dives into that question, and what makes it even more interesting, I think, is that they specifically focused on St. Augustine grass.
Okay, St.
Right.
Augustine grass. So that's a pretty popular one, especially in like the warmer parts of the country, right?
Yeah, exactly. It's a warm season grass that's really common in the southeastern U.S., and that's important because most of the autonomous mowers that you see out there on the market right now are designed for cool season grasses.
Oh,
Like those fescues or bluegrasses.
right, right.
And those are typically mowed shorter, but St. Augustine grass is usually kept a bit higher. So right away, this study is really kind of testing these robots outside of their normal comfort zone.
So it's not just a robot versus human thing. It's almost like, are we even thinking about this the right way for different types of grasses?
Exactly. Yeah, and one of the most basic, kind of fundamental principles of lawn care is this thing called the 1/3 rule.
Okay.
You've probably heard of this before. Basically, you never want to remove more than 1/3 of the grass blade height at any one time when you're mowing.
Okay, makes sense.
Yeah, it really helps to, prevent stress and encourage that healthy growth. But what happens when you've got a robot mower that's designed for those lower cuts going up against a grass that's really happier at a higher height? And so that's what these researchers wanted to find out.
So they basically just took some robot mowers and some regular mowers and just let them loose and saw what happened.
Well, not quite. They designed a really pretty controlled experiment. So they had two main treatments for these lawns. So one group of St. Augustine grass lawns, they mowed those every day using one of these autonomous mowers.
Okay.
And they set the height on that to 2.5 inches. And then the other group, they mowed weekly using just a conventional mulching mower.
Okay.
The kind that, chops up the clippings and puts them back into the lawn as fertilizer.
Right.
And for that, they set the height to 3.5 inches. So they had, their two treatments. And then what they did is they very, very carefully measured all sorts of different aspects of how well that turf grass was doing. So they looked at things like, the green cover, how uniform it was, how dense it was, all those kinds of things.
I gotta admit, I'm kind of picturing these little robots zipping around the lawn. Did
No.
they end up like totally scalping it, giving it a buzz cut?
That's what you would think, right?
Yeah.
But the results were actually really surprising, especially during the winter. What they found is that the autonomous mower actually did better than the conventional mower.
Wait a minute. So the robot, even though it was cutting lower and more often, actually produced a nicer looking lawn,
Yeah.
especially in the winter.
Yeah, it seems kind of counterintuitive, right?
Yeah.
But from November to April, they found that the lawns that were being mowed by the robot had much greater green cover. So they stayed greener longer into those colder months. They also had a much earlier spring green up and just generally looked healthier over the winter. It seems like even though those frequent low cuts kind of go against, what we usually think of for St. Augustine grass, it seems like they actually kept it healthier in the long run.
So maybe those robots actually know a thing or two about taking care of a lawn. But why? Why do you think the robot did so well?
Well, one theory is that the type of cut actually makes a big difference. Robot mowers usually use these tiny little razor-sharp blades, and those make a super clean cut.
Okay.
So that really minimizes any kind of fraying or browning of the grass tips, which, that can make the whole lawn look healthier.
Right.
It's kind of like, when you get a haircut with dull scissors, your hair ends up looking all raggedy. It's kind of the same thing with grass.
So it's getting like a little spa treatment every day.
That's a good way to put it. Now, there's also some speculation that daily mowing itself might be changing things like the canopy temperature or the stress levels. But, we need more research to really figure out what's going on there.
Okay, so we're seeing some potential benefits here.
Yeah.
Especially when it comes to keeping your lawn looking nice, even when it's cold. But before everyone runs out and buys a robot mower, I have to ask, are there any downsides? There's always a catch.
Oh, yeah. No technology's perfect. And the authors of the study did point out a couple of potential downsides. One thing they noticed was that there were some wear patterns forming near the charging stations,
Oh,
where the mower was constantly having to turn around.
right.
And that kind of constant traffic, all that turning, that can put a lot of stress on the grass, making it more prone to diseases, maybe even some thinning.
So you could end up with like this perfectly manicured lawn.
Hmm.
But then there's this weird spot where the robot hangs out.
Exactly. And that's something to keep in mind, especially if you're the kind of person that really wants a perfectly, uniform lawn. And then another thing they had to do was adjust the running times of the mowers depending on the season. Because it turns out too much mowing, even if it's a robot doing it, can actually stress the grass and eventually damage the lawn over time.
So it's all about balance.
It really is, yeah. It's a delicate balance. And it actually brings up a bigger point about, what this technology means for lawns. As these robot mowers become more and more common, especially for warm season grasses like we talked about, we may have to change how we think about lawn care. You know, what works for a normal mower might not work for a robot that's always trimming the grass.
Yeah, you're right. It's like we're in a whole new world of lawn care and we're still trying to figure it all out. What about the environment? Everyone's talking about being more eco-friendly. Are these robot mowers actually good for the planet?
Well, that's a good question, and honestly, we don't really know for sure yet. On the one hand, it seems like they could be a good thing, no gas engines, less noise. But we have to look at the bigger picture, right?
Right.
What about the electricity they need? And what about water and fertilizer? If you're mowing more often and keeping the grass shorter, you might need more water and fertilizer.
That's a good point. So that's more complicated than just swapping out your gas mower.
Absolutely. And there are other things to think about too. Like, what about the soil? Does all that mowing with those tiny blades compact the soil? Could it affect the little ecosystem that's happening underground?
Yeah, those are all really good questions. We need to do more research to figure those things out.
And speaking of things that need research, what about the cost? These robot mowers aren't exactly cheap, right?
No, definitely not. They're a pretty big investment, especially compared to regular mowers. You have to think about the cost of the mower itself, plus maybe installation or setup fees. And then you've got the ongoing costs like electricity, replacing the blades and maintenance. So you're not just buying a mower, you're buying into a whole new way of keeping your lawn looking good. Okay, let's try this. Let's play devil's advocate for a second. Let's say these robots do become like the normal way to mow your lawn. What happens to all the lawn care businesses? Do they just disappear?
That's a great question, and it's really hard to say for sure. Some lawn care businesses might see fewer customers as more people get these robots, but I think the more likely scenario is that those businesses will adapt and find new ways to be helpful.
Right.
Maybe we'll see more services like installing, maintaining, and repairing these robots.
Like a mechanic, but for your lawn. It makes you wonder what other cool innovations we might see in the future. Do you think these robots could become even smarter?
I think so for sure. Technology is always changing and getting better, and I wouldn't be surprised if we see some amazing new features in the next few years. Imagine a robot mower with sensors that can tell how much moisture is in the soil, or if it needs more nutrients, or even if there are any pests or diseases. Then it could adjust its mowing pattern or even apply treatments to take care of those problems.
Oh, it'd be like having a little robot scientist taking care of your lawn. But let's be practical for a second. What are some things people should think about if they're actually thinking about getting a robot mower?
Well, the first thing to consider is your property. Not every lawn is right for a robot mower. If your lawn is really complicated with lots of obstacles or steep hills, or if it's really uneven, it might not work very well. The robots need a fairly open space that's not too crazy for them to do their thing.
Right, you don't want your robot getting stuck in a bush or falling down a hill. What about security? Are these things easy to steal? Do I need to worry about someone running off with my robot mower?
That's a good question. Most of them have built-in security features like PIN codes and GREPS tracking, and some even have alarms. Some models will even send you a message on your phone if they move outside of the area they're supposed to be in.
Oh, wow.
But it's always a good idea to be careful, especially if you live in a place where theft is a problem.
So it's like a Roomba for your lawn, but with extra security. Some of these models even connect to your phone, so you can control them from anywhere. It's pretty amazing. This has been a really interesting deep dive, and I think we've learned a lot about these robot mowers, from the science of how they work to how they could affect the environment and even how much they cost. It's like we've only scratched the surface, though. Before we finish up, I have a couple more questions. We've talked about what's good and bad about robot mowers for the grass itself and how they might change how we take care of our lawns. But what about everything else that lives in our lawns, like weeds and bugs? Can these robots handle those too?
That's a great question. And researchers are actually still looking into that. The study that we were talking about mainly focused on how well the grass was doing, not so much on weed control. But think about it for a second. If you're mowing more often and cutting the grass slower, you're basically giving those weeds a haircut too, like before they even have a chance to really grow tall and spread their seeds.
So it's like you're stopping those weeds before they can even become a problem. Could these robots help us get rid of weeds without having to use harsh chemicals?
It's definitely possible, but I wouldn't say that they're a perfect solution. Some weeds are really tough and can survive even if you mow them all the time. And remember how we were talking about those wear patterns near the charging stations?
Right.
Those spots where the grass is a little weaker could actually be more likely to get weeds. It's complicated.
So it's not like a magic solution,
Hmm.
but it could be another way to help us manage those weeds. What about the good bugs that live in our lawns? Are these robots good or bad for them?
That's another thing we need to learn more about. Some experts think that mowing so often and keeping the grass short could be bad for those helpful bugs, like the ones that pollinate plants or the ones that eat the bad bugs that can damage our lawns.
Right.
But then again, if people start using less pesticides because their robot mowers are taking care of the weeds, that could actually be good for bugs.
It seems like whenever we try to fix one thing, it can have all these other effects that we don't always expect. It makes you really think about how complicated a lawn really is.
Yeah.
Okay, last question. And this is probably what a lot of people really want to know.
Hmm.
Do these robots actually save you money over time?
That's the big question, right? And to be honest, it's really hard to say for sure. You'll definitely save money on gas and oil and maybe even on hiring someone to mow your lawn. But you'll have other costs to think about,
Okay.
like electricity to charge the mower, new blades, and any repairs that it might need. And those things can add up.
So you might not have to pay for gas every week, but you're still paying to keep that robot running.
Hmm.
It's like anything new you buy. There's always a bit of a risk. You're paying for the convenience and maybe even for how cool it is to have a robot mowing your lawn.
Yeah, that's a good way to put it. It really depends on what's important to you. Do you really want to save time and not have to mow the lawn yourself? Are you willing to spend money on a mower that might be better for the environment, even if we don't know for sure yet if it'll save you money in the long run? There's no one right answer. It's all about figuring out what works best for you.
Well, I think we've covered just about everything there is to know about robot lawnmowers. They're definitely cool, and they make us rethink how we take care of our lawns. Who knew that mowing the grass could be so complicated?
I know. That's what makes these deep dives so fun. We start with something that seems pretty simple, and we end up learning all these amazing things. It reminds us that there's always more to learn, more questions to ask, and more things to explore.
That's so true. So as we turn off our robot mowers for today, we'll leave you with this thought. Could these robots be the future of lawn care? A way to make our lawns healthier and better for the planet? Or are they just a new toy with some hidden problems that we haven't figured out yet? We want you to keep thinking about it, keep asking questions, and don't stop learning.
And who knows, maybe someday we'll all be relaxing in our beautiful backyards, enjoying a nice drink while our robot gardeners do all the work. But until then, we've got a lot more to talk about. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive into the world of robot lawnmowers. See you next time for another exciting adventure.